Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here and to be involved in this project. A bit of a surprise, but nevertheless a very welcome surprise. And I wanted to talk to you this evening about risk. I've listened this afternoon to all the presentations, and I was a bit concerned that I hadn't heard anything about the risk of AI. And I think that partly any project of this nature, which is cross-cutting, has to be aware of what the risks could be, not in a specific sense, but in a general sense, because unless you get the foundational element correct, it can make the building of the rest of the structure problematic. So what about the relevance of risk? Why do we deal with risk? And I think that anyone who keeps an eye on artificial intelligence at the moment cannot be ignorant of the fact that people are scared. People are genuinely concerned. Of course, it never came through in anything we've heard, and that's not to say that people are not taking note. It's just simply that I think we don't really know how to react to it. What does it mean, fear of AI? It's very difficult. And I think that if you just look as well with the dispute between Anthropic and the Pentagon over whether or not the models should be used for military purposes, or whether or not you're worried about Palantir and the idea of mass surveillance, etc. We do need to take note of these things because they are important. And I think that even to the extent where you're having large investors in AI talking recently about the Antichrist is coming, there are a lot of cultish elements of AI as well. Where does adoration of AI stop and start? It's there, but does that translate as risk? And I think we have to be very careful that we look at this. And I think that when you get various pioneers of AI, you know, the Geoffrey Hintons, the Bengios, etc., who are saying, this is really bad, and nobody, or why is nobody taking any action? Well, I think it's because they don't know what to do. And we're also aware, if we haven't already, then we should be, there is an AI arms race at the moment. It's very, very deep. And it isn't just a case of how effective the weapon itself is, the weapon platform. It's all the other aspects of battlefield intelligence that goes with it, including, as was just mentioned, target selection. And a colleague from Israel mentioned it as well. So, can we really look for regulation under these conditions? I'm not here saying you can or cannot. I'm simply saying it's a question we have to ask ourselves. So, where should we begin with risk? It's very tempting to just go through all the different areas, the risk of medical, the risk of governance, the risk of military. I don't think that really fits. I think the point of departure is always, what is it that is of value to me that could be under threat? And unless we're prepared to answer that, I don't think you can even begin to come to any consensus in what humanity's problems are, because you haven't really answered the question. And I would also suggest that risk, and in risk for humanity, is on a spectrum. And those who look at AI are seeing this spectrum begin to develop. At one end, you have those who are into existential risk. And there's very, very interesting academic organisations in Cambridge and in Oxford, for example, that focus on existential risk, and large amongst it is AI. The sudden catastrophic event is something that we have to be worried about. Now, some people see that linked to environment, but environment is linked to AI solutions as well. Or it could be somewhere else on that spectrum. What's about losing what it means to be human as a part of an evolutionary path to transhumanism. There's a lot of people who look at AI and think it's not such a bad thing. it's taking us into another stage of evolution. We're all going to be Darwin's very bright children. Of course, unless you're one of those who won't be. And then where are you left? Because you either can't afford it or you're not clever enough. And we've seen in history that there are winners and losers of any technological change. And I think that what we need to look for in risk in essence is about what is it about us that could be lost or damaged or corrupted or deprived, and the borders of machine intelligence are very close to those decisions that are made for us, because we are not making the decisions either. And that's a risk. When you're not at the party, as someone once said, you're probably on the menu, and it's not a good idea. So, as we develop the risk spectrum and look at the context of risk, what is it telling us? Well, one of the first things it's telling is we are very willing as humans to accept AI, and especially the young. And this spectrum of dual use technology, emerging technologies, is very frightening. And there are some people, when I heard the other day there was the Davos meeting, and I think it was Yuval Noah Harari was saying, well, you know, dual use, is this a knife or is it for cutting? And it's all very well and good, but the problem is dual use technologies at the cutting edge are problematic, whether it's nuclear weapons or whether it's biological weapons. And these are things that we're not even beginning to address, partly because we've got so many other problems that we have to look at. But what about the problems we're going to have in the very near future with regard to how much water do you need to keep the data centers going? What are we going to do about the environmental problem when you're only adding to the energy cost of trying to have a better phone? And these are issues that local communities are beginning to deal with. And then with regard to the larger global AI communities, you can't just really see them as AI companies. Many of them are part of the military technical complex. They make weaponry, they design weaponry, they make sure it works. Is there anything wrong with that? No. I'm not saying there is a problem with it, if it's used correctly and if it can give you an advantage trying to defend your value. But the problem is we don't have any transparency to see how it works and how it doesn't. So when recently you had Anthropic arguing with Mr. Hesketh, the Defense Secretary in the United States, or the Secretary of War he's now called, he was saying quite clearly, I will buy your product, but don't you set guardrails. Don't you tell me what my safety regulations have to be. That's for me to decide, the end user. Suddenly, is that company which gives you Claude, and Claude is doing a lot in military conflict, are they innocent AI companies? The same that might make a video game. And these are problems which I think we're going to have to look at more carefully, I would hope, through the project, but you never know. So, what about, finally, AI and societal security? And I call it the sum of all fears. We're always frightened of something. But there are values there that are at risk, and we have to be careful. And I think that we are slowly becoming populations that are part of the post-heroic world. War is drone war, and in the future it will be something else. But the idea of you being heroic and standing up in equal terms to your opponent, they're gone. If you can have a better way of ensuring that you live and the person who's trying to kill you doesn't live, people are going to take it. So when, for example, you look at studies into warfare, etc., and AI and military, they'll talk to people from DARPA, they'll talk to people from ministries of defense, but you won't get the same answer if you ask the soldier on the ground. If you can give him a weapon that keeps him safe and brings him home, Is he going to say, well, I'm not sure if the moral balance is right? I don't think humanity has yet got to that stage. But also we have to worry about the militarization of police forces, of corporate companies who have security elements which are the equal of forces. And AI is making that difference. And I think that at that end, yes, you can see the problem, but we're trying to come to grips with those other problems like economics, of labour, of political manipulation, of the perhaps dilution of democracy because there is artificial intelligence or machine intelligence making a difference. And then, of course, you have the curious. How do we deal with curiosity? I think that when you have doctors who want to experiment, who want to create new kinds of children, who want to misuse pathogens, not for medical benefit, but for curiosity, that's a risk, because these things might not work. So in essence, I would say to you that there is a lot of problems with risk that we haven't yet either identified or trying to solve. But if we don't try to deeply engage with them, our society is going to become the sum of all fears. And the very fact that we're all frightened suggests to me that we're not living a human, decent life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. And the rest is yours.